Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for having me here, and thanks to the Hemp Embassy for bringing me out from Vancouver. Last time I was here in Nimbin was in the 90s when it was just getting going, and things were really getting going in Vancouver and Canada at that time as well. And although we've come a long way, I'm feeling a little sad right now because a lot of my friends in Vancouver are getting busted and threatened and fined right now for running medical marijuana dispensaries. But I want to tell you a little bit about where we've come, about what's going on in Canada, how we've got to where we are there, and maybe how in Australia and Canada and around the world we can work together to end this war on cannabis everywhere on earth. And so just in a way, just some things were getting going in Nimbin in the early and mid-90s. That's at least in terms of the MardiGrass and that. The mid-90s in Canada was also a time of rejuvenation of our marijuana movement. In the 1980s in Canada, our Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney, passed some of the world's harshest censorship laws against the cannabis culture. You know what that's like, because those laws are on the books here in Australia as well. But in Canada, to provide information about growing cannabis is a 6-month jail sentence and a $100,000 fine. Selling bongs and pipes is still illegal in Canada. These laws are passed in the 80s, and we saw a real attack on our culture at that time, and things really shut down. A lot of activists kind of went underground. Our rallies got a lot smaller. Hundreds of head shops in Canada were shut down in the late 80s, and it was kind of a dark time for the cannabis movement. And we saw in the mid-90s the rebirth of the cannabis culture movement in Canada, and the hallmark of that for the last 20 years has been civil disobedience. If you look at the laws on the books, they've actually gotten worse in Canada since that time. But if you look at how things are enforced and what happens on the ground across Canada, we have made incredible strides over the last 20 years. So like I said, it's true that these laws against bongs are still on the books, laws against cannabis information are still on the books, the laws against possession and trafficking cannabis in Canada are quite severe. Yet you walk around a city like Vancouver, there's 150 shops where you can buy medical marijuana quite easily. There's dozens and dozens of bong shops and seed banks. Marijuana information is widely available. Canada's a big country like Australia, and these laws get really enforced differently depending on where you are. So like I said, in Vancouver, where I'm from, things seem a little more open, but if you go to some small towns, people are facing charges for selling bongs. They get raided and for minor cannabis offenses, and trafficking charges and possession charges are 10 or 20 times higher in some parts of the country than in others. But I really believe that civil disobedience is the way you make social change happen. It is the most effective tool for changing the laws, for changing your society than anything else that I've seen. And ultimately our goal is to change those laws, to change those words on the pieces of paper that control our government and our police and our society. But before you get those laws changed, you have to change everything else around that. The law changing is the very last thing that happens. Before the law changes, you need to change public opinion. You need to really create the reality that you want to see. That's what's happening here in Nimbin, where we're creating as a community the kind of situation that we want to see all across Australia and all around the world, where cannabis users can hopefully celebrate their culture openly and peacefully. They don't have to hide, where you can be open about your love for cannabis. But unfortunately, in most of the world, that kind of situation is not available. And of course, even here in Nimbin, you're surrounded by police that are saliva testing people, and there's cops walking all over the place ready to arrest and harass and persecute those who are using cannabis freely and openly and peacefully. So, you know, in the 90s, when we started this program of civil disobedience in Canada, people went to jail for things quite regularly, and they still do. And I say that civil disobedience is a useful technique, but it really only works when you've got a society where the police can be shamed. You've got a society where there's enough democracy left that your elected officials care about what people think and don't like to be shamed, don't like to be seen as bad guys. If you live in a country where civil disobedience gets you a bullet in the back of the head or a 30-year jail sentence, maybe that's not always the best technique. But in Canada, and I think we have something that gives us an advantage over Australia, which is our Charter of Rights. This was passed into law by Pierre Trudeau, the father of our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, in the 1970s. And it is the Charter of Rights that has allowed our movement to make such great progress, because when we engage in civil disobedience, or when we go to court to fight these unjust laws, the Charter is the tool that lets judges either give us very minimal sentences compared to the maximum penalties written under law, And it's the charter that had allowed us to force our government, after years and years and years and hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars in litigation, to force the Canadian government to allow people to grow cannabis for themselves, for their own medical use with a license. We forced the government to license 24 companies that are growing medical marijuana to be supplied by patients through mail order. And we've forced the government to reconsider the cannabis laws in Canada, to begin the process of legalization. Our last Prime Minister in Canada was a guy named Stephen Harper, and he was in power for 10 years. And he only ever had a minority of Canadians supporting him, never more than about a third or so of our population really voted for him. But with that first past the post system and under our Canadian system, all you really need is a good 30 or 40%, and you can form very strong majority governments. And Harper passed also some very severe mandatory minimum sentences so that in Canada, growing just 6 cannabis plants to share with your friends gets you a 6-month mandatory minimum jail sentence. And selling cannabis products the way I do at my dispensary also qualifies you for some very severe mandatories. Myself and all my staff qualify for a minimum year in jail because we're selling more than 3 kilos of cannabis in our inventory to our members. And yet, like I said, these laws are very oddly enforced across the country, and it's a very strange time for Canadians right now. People don't really know what's going on with the law. They walk around Vancouver and they see all these dispensaries and they go, well, isn't it legal to run a medical marijuana dispensary? I just went in there and bought some cannabis for my arthritis or for my ailment. And the answer is no. These dispensaries are totally banned in Canada. And yet, through civil disobedience, through using the Charter of Rights, through going to court, through making it such a hassle for them to charge us and bust us and go to court, that they pretty much give up because it's too much work and too expensive for them to continue. And it takes people willing to get busted, willing to take that risk, willing to perhaps go to jail for the weekend, perhaps to be imprisoned for a longer period of time. People who believe so passionately in this plant and in the future of cannabis and in the strength of our movement that they're willing to let themselves be charged and risk the imprisonment, risk their freedom. But it takes that kind of action to really make a change. And so we've seen that happen so strongly in my country and others around the world. Right now, the city of Vancouver is governed by a party called Vision Vancouver. And I actually helped lobby for them. They're kind of the left-center party in our city. And they promise to support dispensaries. And they've called for legalization and said they believe cannabis should be legalized. And yet, we've got 150 dispensaries in the city now, but without any regulations at all. And the city says, well, let's have some bylaws. You guys want some bylaws, right? And we said, yeah, we want some bylaws. Make us official. Don't leave us hanging without a business license. Treat us like other businesses. And they said, okay, we'll treat you like other businesses, but except what they've done is actually treat us far more severely than any other business in the city. They've created rules for dispensaries that force us to be 300 meters away from schools and community centers. Now, if they put those rules in before 150 of us had opened, we would have tried to follow those rules perhaps. But there's an irony that in Vancouver, liquor stores have only got to be 150 meters from schools. And they give all kinds of exemptions for that as well. So for me, for instance, I've got a dispensary a few blocks away from a community center. The city says I have to go. There's nowhere else to go because the city is full and there's schools and community centers everywhere. But across the street from us, they're opening up a beer tasting brewery where you can come and taste your beer. And the community center hates that being there and complains about it. The city says, too bad. We're going to put that brewery there, but don't worry, we'll get rid of that dispensary. Never mind they've been there for 10 years. Never mind they donate regularly to the community center. Never mind how much we help our community by donating to build a park on the corner, to help the women's shelter, to help the drug addiction clinics. We do everything we can to make our community better. But the city doesn't care. We're too close to that community center and we have to move and there's simply nowhere to go. And it's not just about me and my dispensary. There's so many in our city that are facing closure. And today, for the first day, they've come out. They're starting to fine people. They're starting to go after people. In a way, it's a victory in that they're not using the police anymore to go after dispensaries. And I'm sure if you went to many cities around the world and said, hey, we're going to allow you to have 20 medical marijuana shops in town. Isn't that awesome? People would probably be quite happy with that. That would be a huge step forward. But in a city where there's 150 shops operating openly, where the city itself claims to support legalization, to support medical marijuana, to want to create a system that's fair and just and open, and then tell us that system means that 90% of us have to shut down or face fines or censure, that's not fair to me at all. That's something we're going to keep on fighting. And people tell me, well, legalization is coming soon, and when it comes, won't you have nothing left to do? I mean, once it's legal, it's going to be done, right? You'll be able to retire. And I say, no, not at all. Legalization is merely one step on a long, long path that we're on. Because even when the day comes when they might allow us to buy a little bit of cannabis in a store, we're still going to have to fight for the right to grow our own cannabis at home. We're still going to have to fight for the right not to lose our children when we're smoking marijuana. We're still going to be fighting for our right not to lose our jobs, not to be drug tested and punished for using cannabis, for being responsible cannabis users. This fight is going to go on for a long time. And the legalization we get is going to be a crappy legalization at first. We know that. It's not going to be a positive. It's going to be an ongoing battle to control us and restrict us through a legalization that is really another form of prohibition. And we're seeing this in Canada, where, like I said, there's hundreds of dispensaries. That is a model I like. Grassroots, small business, craft cannabis grown locally in a small way to create a high-quality product made with love and passion. People want to make a profit, but they also care about the product they're making. The other path we have in Canada are these licensed producers, and there's 24 companies that were licensed by the Conservative government under duress, being forced to by the courts. And these companies are growing medical marijuana in highly secure facilities with cameras and big thick walls, and everybody's tightly screened before they're allowed to touch those plants, and there's a lot of rules and restrictions about that. They can sell it to patients only by mail order. You have to go to your doctor. You got to pick which one of these 24 companies you want to order from before you've had a chance to see any product or know what the quality is like. Once you've picked one, you're locked in. Switching companies is very, very difficult. And they will mail you your cannabis by mail order. And frankly, it's usually not very good. I wish you'd think these kind of big companies, some of them are worth $500 million in Canada. They're huge, big investments in these companies. You think they'd be able to grow some really world-class cannabis, and yet, by and large, the pot they're producing is not very good. Some of them actually send it to patients milled. So they grind up your buds for you to save you the hassle of doing it yourself. They put it in a prescription bottle and they send you milled buds. Now, if you know anything about cannabis, you know that once you grind it up, those resin glands begin to deteriorate. The terpenes and flavonoids and all that good stuff immediately begins to evaporate off the plant. Why they would do that is just beyond me, but it's a bizarre, and it shows to me they don't understand the product they're dealing with. But these companies are bribing doctors, they're making deals with doctors. You send us patients, you encourage your patients to come to us, and we'll give you a kickback, we'll give you some cash to make sure that you get paid for referring people to us. And maybe that's how the movement matures. I know that pharmaceutical companies do the same thing with doctors, but to me, that is an obscenity. It's profiteering on the backs of the sick off a plant that really should be free. I don't want to see a legalization that means only the rich and powerful can grow cannabis and they try to sell it to the rest of us for $10 a gram. That's not legalization. That's prohibition with a different dealer. Legalization means I can grow cannabis at home for myself and my family and my friends. Legalization means that farmers can grow high THC marijuana by the thousands of hectares. That's the vision I have for legalization in Canada and Australia and around the world. I want to see farmers growing marijuana. That is what we're going to do. And you know, in Canada, we have a vibrant hemp industry. Well, not really vibrant. We got a hemp industry and it's growing. It's still governed by Health Canada, and as a result, they give out licenses very late. Farmers often don't get their permit for that year until it's too late to have the optimal period to plant their seeds in the ground. But what I find interesting about Canada's cannabis industry is they're growing all this cannabis for seed production. We don't grow a lot for fiber in Canada. We grow it for seed. And when you grow bud for seed, you grow big, fat, large, medicinal-looking colas that then get fertilized by the male plants and get filled up with seeds. But those buds also produce a lot of resin as well. Now, of course, that resin doesn't have a lot of THC in it, but it's very high in CBD. And anybody out here, you probably are well aware that CBD has gotten some incredible medical benefits, just like THC does, but it lacks the psychoactivity that THC has. Canada's hemp farmers are producing more resin than all of our marijuana farmers combined. It doesn't matter how big your warehouse is or how big your basement is. You can't compete with people who are using tractors to harvest their cannabis plants. And so, but those farmers have to put it all back in the ground. They're not allowed to keep any of that resin. By law, they're only allowed to harvest the seeds. The rest of the plant must be mulched back into the earth. They can't keep it. If our farmers could keep that cannabis resin that they're producing, they could produce CBD medicines pure CBD products for pennies a gram, for incredibly cheap. It's a waste product right now. A waste product that can cure cancer. A waste product that treats epilepsy. A waste product that has incredible, amazing medical benefits that they're just throwing away while they want us to buy $10 a gram marijuana from these few big companies. And for the first time last year, I'm so excited because for the first time last year, after 20 years of Canada's hemp industry saying, we're not like marijuana, we don't have any resin, we're totally separate from marijuana, there's no medicinal, none of that, it's only just for the seeds. But for the first time last year, Canada's hemp trade industry asked the federal government, can we please harvest and keep our cannabis resin? Can we please keep that CBD and sell it to patients or sell it to pharmacies or make some money off this? If and when the government says yes, that is going to revolutionize the cannabis industry in Canada and around the world. And although I expect the government to be dicks about it and to say no at first, it's kind of hard for them to say no. You can't keep that thing you've been growing for the last 20 years and throwing away. Because where's the harm? They've already been doing this for so long. No kids have been sneaking in there and stealing the buds. There's been no farmers growing marijuana in their hemp fields. Our industry has had no problems. All the fears and propaganda in the 90s when they were about to legalize hemp in Canada, all these fears are brought up, and in 20 years, not one is manifested. So I'm hoping that in the next year or two, Canadian farmers will be able to grow not high THC marijuana, but at least they'll be able to harvest the resins off their plants and make medicinal products out of those. And I know they can because I'm pretty sure a couple of those farmers are already harvesting those resins anyways. And I can't say for sure, but I think that there's a dispensary or two in Canada, and I might even own one of those, that buys that hemp resin from those farmers and makes it available to our patients. Because you can get incredibly low-priced products. So that is why, in fact, our dispensary has the lowest priced CBD products available anywhere in Canada. Because we work with those hemp farmers to get those resins off their plants and to our patients, even though that's still illegal. But I'm excited about the future of this in this way, because if we can get our farmers to be growing CBD resin, then it's not a big step to be able to get them to be growing high THC marijuana. And that is a future that I want to see. Now, my dispensary, we sell marijuana for $5 to $8 a gram because that's the going price. That's what it costs us to buy our cannabis and to be able to sell it without going bankrupt. But I want my dispensary to go out of business. I want legal marijuana products to be so cheap and plentiful and affordable that my business model of buying cannabis on a small scale from growers and selling it for $5 a gram simply cannot compete with farmers who are producing pure THC, pure CBD, or any combination of all those cannabinoids, CBN, CBG, whatever, all the alphabet of cannabinoids that are out there, many of whom have medicinal value that we're only beginning to understand. Under a fully legalized market, the way it should be, those pure cannabinoids should be dirt cheap and available for the same price as the most expensive arugula out there, or the highest quality tomatoes out there. That's what cannabis should really be. And we're going to make that happen. We're going to do it in Canada in the next few years, and it's going to happen all around the world. Well, there we go. Even our hemp industry in Canada began with civil disobedience. Farmers were applying to get hemp licenses and they were turned down. There's a guy named Brian Taylor who lives in a small town called Grand Forks, and he applied for a hemp license in the early 90s, and he couldn't get one. And he was so upset that he got some underground hemp seeds, and he planted hemp on his front lawn, visible from the highway, in the shape of the letters H-E-M-P. So anybody driving by would see his crop growing there, and sure enough, the RCMP came by and they arrested him and charged him with cultivation of marijuana. And then he ran for mayor of Grand Forks while he was facing those charges, and he became mayor of the city. Shortly after that, the charges were dropped, and shortly after that, he got his license to grow hemp the next year on his field. And this civil disobedience is standing up to the police, standing up to the authorities in a peaceful, transparent way. It's the way that change happens. When you can embarrass the police and embarrass the authorities and make yourself be the good guy and make them be the bad guy, that's how you make change happen. So I've been engaging in a lot of civil disobedience in Canada over the years, and I was inspired by one good friend of mine, Mark Emery, a Vancouver activist who really helped launch the civil disobedience campaign in Canada, beginning with bongs and pipes, moving on to marijuana seeds, selling those not just to Canadians, but all around the world. And he paid the price with a 4.5-year stint in the American prison system for doing that, but yet his campaign was remarkably successful because in Canada, bong shops are everywhere, seeds are widely available, And our movement really got a big kickstart from all the work that he did. But one slogan that we had in Canada that Mark really helped launch is OverGrow Canada, overgrow the government. I know there's an OverGrow Australia campaign going on as well. There's a guy here doing what I've been doing in Canada, which is giving away cannabis seeds for folks to grow openly and freely, not only on their own property, but on public property all across the country. And I've got some hemp farmer friends, and one of them gave me 8 or 9 big buckets about this big, full of hemp seeds. And I call them high CBD cannabis seeds. This is a variety of cannabis grown for seed production. Very, very low levels of THC, but if you grow it outdoors and you don't let the male plants pollinate the female plants, you'll get between 8 and 12% CBD. That's enough to make a nice, good quality extract. You could smoke it if you wanted to. I wouldn't really recommend that, but you can make a good extract out of that, get some of the CBD medicine out of that. But really, I wanted people just to grow these seeds across the country, to grow them openly and freely, and I've given away almost 1 million cannabis seeds so far by mail order and in person across the country. And it's been remarkably successful, you know. People are planting these seeds openly. I'm getting all kinds of pictures and photographs of these plants growing. And the idea behind this campaign is to make cannabis plants grow so commonly, so ubiquitously, that when you're walking down the street and you see a cannabis plant, you don't go, oh my God, that's cannabis. Is anybody, oh goodness. You go, that's a nice looking plant. 12th one I've seen today. Isn't it lovely? And you keep on walking down the street. I want to make it so the police can't keep up with how much cannabis is out there that they give up pursuing cannabis charges. Just like they've given up for the most part coming after us at our big cannabis rallies in Canada, where we get anywhere from a few hundred to tens of thousands of Canadians coming out to smoke marijuana, share marijuana, and in Vancouver and Toronto and other big cities to sell marijuana openly. We had our 420 rally, a few weeks ago on 420, a few days ago, I guess. I'm a little time dilated here in Australia. We had our 420 rally recently in Vancouver at a brand new location on a big public beach. We had 200 booths selling marijuana products, all with nice 19 years or over signs on their booths, and it was a wonderful thing to see. That was our biggest cannabis rally ever in Vancouver. We moved from our last spot where it was way overcrowded and becoming like a big mosh pit due to our success, but we're selling cannabis openly and freely, and the police don't really stop us because there's 100,000 people there, and they don't like being outnumbered. But so we can make a lot of change. But you know, I part of my plan for these seeds is I toured across Canada. I went to 16 cities and I gave a talk about the history of cannabis in Canada. A fascinating talk, which you won't get tonight, but if you want to buy my book on the history of cannabis in Canada, even though you're not Canadians, I think you'll find a lot in there that's very interesting. But I give a talk about the history, and then I give away these seeds to those who show up at the event. And so I did 16 cities, and in one of those cities, the police came out to mess with me. And they did that because I have a hater in Vancouver named Pamela McCall. And Pamela does not like marijuana, certainly does not like me, says I'm turning Canada into a narco state, and my pro-cannabis stance is going to addict children from coast to coast, and her mission is to stop me from doing my mission, which is legalizing marijuana. And so when she heard about my tour, she started calling all the venues I was going to be speaking at and saying, hey, Dana's going to be breaking the law. You better cancel his venue. I'm calling the police, and they're going to be down there, and they're going to charge you too. You better cancel that. You better cancel his talk. And so sure enough, some of our venues got scared and canceled, and we had to find new spots and rebook. And she called the police in several towns and said, hey, Dana's going to be giving away marijuana seeds. You're not going to let him do that in your town, are you? Are you mice or are you men? You get out there and you arrest that guy. And sure enough, in Calgary, a bunch of cops came down to our event. Calgary is in the heart of Canada's oil industry. It's the city that our last Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, came from. And so the Calgary police came down, and I was giving my talk in a room, a little smaller than this one, a really packed room. And in the hallway outside, my assistant, Cindy, had envelopes. She was giving out seeds. I was doing my talk. She came in and gave me a note. The police are here. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to keep talking. I don't see the need. They can drag me off stage if they want to. I finished my talk. And then I heard someone had been arrested at our event. And I was like, well, it's not me being arrested. That's a bit odd. They should be arresting me. I'm the guy giving away seeds. So I went to see what was going on and went outside, and I found one of our volunteers stuck in a police car. And he had gone back to the van to get some more seeds. And although the police didn't want to bug anybody in this crowded room with all these people there, when one of our folks was by himself at the van with all our seeds, well, they grabbed him, tossed him in the police car, and grabbed the van and had a whole bunch of my seeds in the van. So I went down to the officer and I said, look, I'm the one giving away seeds. If you're going to arrest anybody at my event, it should be me. And he said, nah, I don't really want to do that. And I said, well, you're gonna, So I said, give me some seeds. And hundreds of people are all there with me, right? So I grabbed some seeds and I shook them into a few people's hands in front of the police officer. They all started saying, arrest me, I got seeds, arrest me. And I had 6 seeds in my hand, and I said, I just gave out seeds, I got seeds, you need to arrest me now. And he said, okay, we'll arrest you. Normally I don't pursue being arrested, and in fact, in 20 years of activism and civil disobedience, for me, that was my first arrest for civil disobedience. Normally my role has been to help my friends get arrested and to be the guy on the outside rallying the troops and putting on vigils and calling the media and whatnot, but they arrested me, took me downtown. They actually drove me to one jail to hold me. Just as they were pulling in, the cop went, oh, we're going somewhere else. And he pulled out, went back on the highway, and took me another hour down to a different jail further away. And I said, why are we switching spots? He goes, I don't know, I just do what they tell me. What had happened was my friend Cindy back at the venue had been saying, we're going to go down to that jail, we're going to get Dana out of there, we're not going to let this stand. So they were expecting some kind of, pot-smoking riot outside the jail. So they took me to the farther away one. They held me there overnight until about 4 a.m., made me sign a document saying that I was going to be subject to a mandatory minimum 6-month jail sentence if I was convicted, and then I was released. I was released on bail with some conditions. I had to give him $1,000, had to promise a $10,000 surety if I broke my bail conditions, and my bail conditions are that I cannot possess any drug. Doesn't say any illegal drugs, so that must mean coffee and aspirin and tobacco and alcohol or whatever, but cannot possess any drug without a doctor's prescription except when I'm at work. Because I run medical marijuana dispensary and I sell marijuana every day. And like I said, that's illegal also in Canada. That's also against the law, probably more against the law to sell marijuana to thousands of people for medical purposes than it is to give away a handful of cannabis seeds. But I'm allowed at work, but nowhere else. And they didn't say at work at my address, so if you see me smoking a joint here in Nimbin, I'm working. I'm at work all the time, and this is my life's work, so that's how I'm interpreting that bail condition. But we'll see if this gets on the news in Canada or not. But anyway, so I couldn't possess except at work, and then I get out of the jail, they give you your belt back, and they give me my tie back. Then they give me back the 6 cannabis seeds that I had in my hand when they arrested me. The officer had taken them from the police car, put them with my possessions, and then when I got to the jail, they gave them to the guy there. And when I left, they gave them back to me. And at first I was like, wait a minute, I just promised not to possess cannabis seeds. Is this a trap? Are they going to jump on me when I take these seeds? But I gingerly took the bag, and nothing happened. I put it in my pocket, nothing happened. Then I walked out of the courthouse, and I still have those seeds. I'm going to bring them to the trial and say, hey, did you guys forget something? Because the only evidence they have of me trafficking in seeds is those 6 seeds. The seeds given away at my event was actually done by my assistant, who wasn't facing any charges. And the seeds in the van, well, the van was actually in my assistant's name. It was a rental van, so those aren't my seeds. Those are her seeds. And so the only seeds they have to charge me on are the ones that were in my hand that I gave to the police officer, and they gave them back to me. So my lawyer says, look, we just tell the judge, they're not treating this very seriously. You shouldn't treat it very seriously either, judge, right? But the point is that these laws are really enforced so arbitrarily, not only in Canada, but all around the world. And if you can make them look like a bunch of idiots, that's a good thing. People are like, aren't you afraid? You got a 6-month mandatory sentence. I'm like, no one's looking at me and going, he's an idiot. They're looking at the cops and going, the cops busted this guy for 6 seeds? What the hell are they doing? This is Justin Trudeau's Canada. Our prime minister was smoking pot as an MP a couple of years ago. When he admitted to it, we were like, that's cool, man. We'll make you prime minister. We don't care if you smoke pot. In fact, probably it's a bonus that you smoked pot. We like that about you. We're glad we got a PM who says he smokes pot. But if we get caught smoking pot, will he forgive us yet? No, he's still saying we're going to enforce the letter of the law. He's still saying we want to bust everybody as strictly as possible until the day the law changes. The law is the law. Not only that, Justin Trudeau's mom smokes pot. She says openly in the media. She says, I still use marijuana. It makes me feel good. It helps me with my depression. It's good for my mental health. He's got a brother who died in an avalanche several years ago. And when his brother died in that avalanche, he was facing possession charges as well in Canada. And I'm sure when his brother got charged, Justin Trudeau didn't call him and say, well, hey, man, the law is the law. You deserve that charge. I'm glad you got charged. And, if I become prime minister, I'm going to make sure we keep charging people like you. No, he said, oh, that sucks, man. I'm sorry you got charged. That's too bad. I hope you get off. I hope they drop the charges. I hope things go well for you. So this hypocrisy is really boggling to me. It's really frustrating to me. And it's not a good sign, that when legalization comes, the legalization that I want to see comes with an apology. The legalization that I want to see has the government say, We're sorry for 100 years of prohibition. What a terrible mistake our ancestors made to introduce these racist, ignorant laws. We're sorry that so many Canadians and so many people around the world were punished for no good reason. We're sorry that so many people had to live lives of suffering and anguish because they didn't know and they couldn't access the benefits of cannabis medicine because we kept that hidden and because we put them in jail when they tried to heal themselves. That's the legalization I want to see. I want a fucking apology from the government. Every government on earth is going to apologize for this. And it'll come eventually. But it's not going to come right away. It's going to come, I joke that Justin Trudeau's kid is going to be the one to give the apology because his dad, now him, it'll be another generation. Once pot's been legalized a long time, we'll get an apology. But in Canada, they say, we're going to legalize it. We're going to legalize it because marijuana is dangerous and because those drug dealers want to hook our kids on pot. And the only way to keep this dangerous, harmful thing away from our kids, the only way to stop those dirty dope smokers from contaminating you and your family is with a strict legalization that increases penalties for those who sell marijuana to minors, a strict legalization that keeps this dangerous drug out of our communities as much as possible, but lets those people who, the marijuana addicts get what they need. And that, to me, maybe it's something in the right direction, I don't know, but that's not the legalization I want. That doesn't fill my heart with joy, hearing that. Hearing me being called that we're bad people and that marijuana is a harmful, dangerous substance. Marijuana, cannabis, is the greatest plant on earth. There is no other plant that does what cannabis does. And until we have a government that recognizes that, we're still in prohibition. We're still fighting this battle. So that's where I am in Canada. That's where we're going. We're making progress. We're fighting these laws. We're making changes. But there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of fear. There's still a lot of challenges. And I feel that we're ahead of you folks here in Australia in some ways, because at least the police aren't blockading our towns to tongue swab everybody for cannabis residue. But at the same time, I feel like that's coming to Canada. I feel like that's going to be part of legalization. They say we can't legalize it until we got to breathalyze it and make sure all those stoned drivers don't kill everybody on the road. And of course, we know that cannabis is not impairing. We know the only time you shouldn't drive after cannabis is if you've eaten a large quantity or if it's your first time smoking a joint. But otherwise, cannabis is not impairing. Cannabis does not cause the problems that alcohol does in any fashion at all. And every time anybody chooses to use cannabis instead of alcohol, they are making a responsible choice for themselves and for their community and for their society. I don't want to ban alcohol. I'm not against alcohol. But I don't like when the alcohol culture and the alcoholics that run our societies persecute the cannabis users in favor of their deadly drink. And I'm pretty sure here, the politicians here, just like in Canada, they want to pose with a big beer during the election campaigns. There's always a talk about which politician do you want to drink a beer with and which one would you want to get drunk with. And this alcohol promotion all the time. They want us to keep our dispensaries away from schools, but there's billboards and bus advertisements for alcohol. There's magazine and TV advertisements for alcohol. And yet we want to promote cannabis as a safe alternative to alcohol. And they say, no, we don't want that. You're too dangerous. Your stuff's too dangerous. We're not going to allow that to happen. I've actually heard some cops in Canada, if you've ever heard this here, saying that cannabis is worse than alcohol or tobacco because it combines all the intoxication of alcohol with all the cancer-causing carcinogens of tobacco smoke, all rolled into one terrible demonic product. And those kind of things make me so sad when I hear that ignorance is still there and that hate is still there. So we have a lot of work to do together. But we are getting closer and closer. And I tell you, the day before legalization happens is going to be the day the most busts happen. It's not going to fade away. It's going to escalate into a climax before things finally go over to our side. So in a way, when they crack down on us more, maybe it's kind of a good sign because the only tools that they have are propaganda and violence. Those are the only tools the government has to keep us in line, is to lie about us and to use their violence against us. And they got all the guns. They got all the strength that way. But what we have is we have our faith and our knowledge that we're doing the right thing. And we have our convictions that we are on the right path. And we also have a growing number of people that are coming over to our side. There's groups like Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP. I'm sure you've heard of this group. Many current and former police officers some of whom spent years and years, decades of their lives, busting cannabis users, fighting this failed war on drugs. When they went into it, they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought drugs are bad, and I'm going to protect our society. I'm going to keep kids off drugs. I'm going to stop those marijuana addicts from wrecking our society. And they do this for a few years, and they go, this is kind of stupid, actually. We're not really accomplishing anything. Then a few more years go by, and they go, what the hell is going on? But I'm going to retire soon, so I better wait till I retire before I really come out against this stuff. And then finally they retire, and then they go, you know what? My whole career was a waste. Everything I did was wrong. I'm sorry. It was a big waste of time. Prohibition is really bad. We're getting converts all the time. You don't see too many people who are like, well, I used to think pot should be legal, but now I realize actually that prohibition is the right way to go. That doesn't happen very often. We are building momentum. We are building strength. We are getting more converts every day. And when that happens, our opponents can only use propaganda and violence against us, and they will use more and more as time goes on. They will push harder and harder. But we are going to win. I know that we're going to win. And that in my lifetime, we will see a legalization of cannabis, an end to cannabis prohibition, not just a model where there's $10 grams from Monsanto and DuPont, but a real legalization where everybody can grow their own cannabis, can use their own cannabis, and can have this plant be free. And I want to give you a little vision of the future. I want you to think ahead. I want you to imagine yourself as a grandparent or a grandmother or a grandfather. If you're already a grandmother or a grandfather, then imagine yourself as a great-grandmother or great-grandfather in the future. And I want you to imagine yourself with your grandchild there, getting ready for school. They're flipping through their history book, cramming for their exam, having some breakfast. And they turn to you and they say, Grandma, Granddad, I'm reading in my history book that cannabis used to be illegal in Australia and all around the world. I'm reading here that for like 100 years, people would get arrested and charged for just growing a few cannabis plants or for smoking a bit of cannabis medicine. And it cost trillions of dollars in that time, and millions of lives were ruined. People were incarcerated. Families were torn apart. All these terrible things happened over this plant. And yet, I'm having cannabis hemp seed porridge for breakfast. And our house is built out of cannabis fiberboard. And I know that you use cannabis medicines to treat the aches and pains of being a senior citizen. And I know that we have a nice cannabis patch in the backyard that I work with you on to help make it healthy and grow, and it's such fun to plant those seeds and harvest it every year. And I know that the bus that takes me to school runs on hemp seed diesel fuel, and the bus itself is made out of hemp composite fiberboard as well. And my school is built out of hemp, and the history book that I'm reading is printed on hemp paper, and I'm wearing hemp clothes. And so how can it be that this plant was banned for so long? How can it be there was over 100 years of prohibition all around the world? And I want you to be able to say, yeah, it's true, it was. When I was born, and for most of my life, cannabis was illegal. And it was a dark time in our world's history because people's lives were so adversely affected, and maybe me or someone I knew and cared for was arrested or charged or incarcerated, maybe for a long time over this plant. But I want you to be able to say to that future child, grandchild of yours, you know what? I did something to change those laws. I sacrificed something. I did something. I worked. I made a difference. When I worked in Nimbin to make Nimbin the best place it could be. I wrote letters to the paper. I marched in parades. I talked to my politicians. I did something every day to change those cannabis laws and to end prohibition. And I remember the day came when the law finally changed, and when we knew that we would never be criminalized again for using this plant. And I remember the day when they opened the prison doors and they let out our brothers and sisters who were jailed for using cannabis and for their love affair for the cannabis plant. And how wonderful it felt to have those changes happen and to know that those sacrifices that we made were not in vain, and that we had done those things and fought those battles so that you, the future generation, would never have to know what it is to be ashamed or to have to hide what herbal medicine you use, or to fear arrest and charges for what plants you choose to grow in your garden. I want that to be the legacy that we leave for future generations, because people thought marijuana was about to be legalized before. In the 1970s, Canadians and Americans and around the world, we thought we're so close to legalization, but so many years have gone by, so many people have been charged and arrested, and these laws have still not changed. And now, around the world, this cause is rising, and we have a unique opportunity to change these laws and to end this prohibition forever so that it never has to rear its ugly head again. And I hope and I believe that you will all join me in this quest, because if you're here in this room, if you're here in Nimbin to celebrate the Mardi Gras, it's because you love cannabis. It's because cannabis has made your life better in some way. Lord knows, cannabis has made my life so much better. It's improved my life in so many ways to have access to this plant. And I love cannabis, and I want every human being on earth to be able to experience the healing power of cannabis, to be able to use this plant and to join in unity with this plant and with the cannabis culture all around the world. And so I hope that you will take this opportunity, that you won't just leave Nimbin and come back next year and have it be a break. I want you to bring Nimbin home with you. I want you to make every day a Mardi Gras, just a little bit, and half an hour or an hour a day where you commit to doing something to changing those laws, to doing something so that the little bit of freedom we have here in Nimbin can become better and can spread all across Australia, all around the world, so that no one on earth ever has to be persecuted or ashamed or punished or have any negative repercussions for using cannabis at all. That is my dream, and I will not rest until cannabis is legalized in every city, in every town on this planet. And I hope and I believe that you will all join me in this quest, as will many others all around the world. So thank you very much for having me here and listening to my talk. And together, we are going to end prohibition in Nimbin and Australia and everywhere on earth. And when we do that, what a glorious day that will be. Thank you very much. I don't know what time it is or how long I talked, but I think we have some time for... Perfect. That's what I love to hear. So if you have any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to,
yes, we have a
take any questions or anything about anything you want to talk about.
Yes, we have a question over here.
So Dana, did you have any trouble getting into Australia? Because a couple of times I've been to Canada. First time I only got given 2 weeks, and then the next time I think it was only 2 weeks as well. So I always find it interesting that the Canadian border, the US is much more gentle, but the Canadian, boy. And I don't know whether, with their history, with your history, whether Australia, any...
I had no problems coming into Australia, although I was pretty nervous about it. I do have problems getting into the U.S., meaning I can't get into the U.S. But Australia, I just put my passport under a little thing, and then I didn't even talk to anybody. You just look at the camera and you go. That being said, I have no criminal record. I am facing charges right now, but I don't think they notified the Australian government that I'm facing charges for trafficking in 6 cannabis seeds. If I get convicted, I expect it'll be harder to come back, but this trip I had no problems, and I wish I'd brought some BC Bud with me, actually, because I didn't, because I was worried about stuff, but that would have been fun. But no problems getting in this time, and hopefully I don't have any problems next time either. Oh, okay, I'll let her do that.
David, because of your climate there, do you have to grow in hot houses? Your growing season is not very long, is it?
We grow some great outdoor cannabis. Most of the bud in Canada is grown indoors, but British Columbia is known for outdoor marijuana cultivation, an industry that really began to spread in a big way in the 1970s when American Vietnam draft dodgers came to Canada and took up growing outdoors. But no, we grow a lot of pot outdoors in BC. In Ontario and out east, it's harder because the winter is harsher and the growing season is shorter, but in British Columbia, with our mild climate, we grow a lot of outdoor cannabis, and it is fabulous. There's a fellow back here who's got a question.
Thanks. I was just wondering, do you do like a feed the birds type of campaign? You just give people seeds to scatter around in parks, government front lawns, things like that. Random weed plants pop up everywhere, and you just say, "Oh, I'm feeding the birds."
Well, yeah, I mean that's the idea. Although if you just scatter them, you actually are feeding the birds, right? I tell people you got to put them in the ground for them to grow, right? Just push them under a ½ inch or so. But I mean they will come after you. It depends on where you are and what you're doing, right? The only other stop on my Canadian tour that I had problems was the Parliament buildings, where I announced I was going to do an OverGrow thing at the Parliament buildings, and we didn't get a huge turnout of people. Everywhere else it was really packed groups, but a lot of cops showed up at the Parliament buildings. And in Ottawa, people are nervous about doing stuff on the Parliament grounds. But But I've got a lot of seeds, and we're planting them everywhere, and I'm hoping they grow all across the country so openly and freely. It's going to be exciting. But if you tell them you're just doing bird seed, I mean, they're unlikely to charge you for cannabis seeds in Canada unless you're me at an event giving them away openly and someone calls and harasses them about it. The last time a Canadian was charged for selling marijuana seeds to other Canadians was 15 years ago, and that guy got a $500 fine. And he had a store called The Sacred Herb selling marijuana seeds. I'm giving away high CBD, low THC seeds. I don't expect anything more than them to drop the charges, actually, but maybe a fine. But they said they're seeking a 6-month mandatory minimum sentence, so we'll see how that goes. All right, well, there you go. So just before I leave the stage, I'm going to plug my 3 books. I've got the Illustrated History of Cannabis in Canada, which a lot of it's universal history you might enjoy, and if you're interested in cannabis, you'll learn a lot about what's going on in Canada. It covers over 400 years of history. I've got a book called Harry Pothead and the Marijuana Stone. It's entertaining and amusing and funny and exciting, hopefully, as well. It's got a few illustrations in it, but it's a full-on parody of Harry Potter, in case you hadn't figured that out. And it's available at Perceptio and at the Hemp Embassy. And my other book, which is my bestseller, is Green Buds and Hash. It's a fun little parody of green eggs and ham, beautifully illustrated by a good friend of mine, and it's also available at Perceptio and the Hemp Embassy. And if you catch one of those places, I'm happy to sign a copy for you as well. And otherwise, OverGrow Australia, thanks again for having me. And if you want to chat, I'm here for the rest of the day. Bye for now.